It's another month, so let's look back at all the films and TV shows that I watched in the month of June. Starting with season 1 of the Spider-Man 90s show. I heard this was one of like the best Spider-Man shows, second to Spectacular Spider-Man, and this was a pretty good first season. I think I enjoyed it more than the 90s X-Men show, because I thought Peter's quippiness in this season was pretty entertaining, although a lot of references he was making were extremely dated. But I liked seeing the Spider-Man story adapted in a different way to something like the Raimi movies, and I thought the Venom arc was really solid here, although I thought the first 2 parts were more solid than the final arc, because I really like how dark Peter got in the symbiote suit, for a kids show as well. The rest of the season was pretty good, but it's just a little bit forgettable. I'm not really that interested to come back for other seasons, and I heard the show is not as good with the follow-up seasons, so I'd give it a 7. And then I rewatched Into the Spider-Verse. I think I rewatched this before in 2021, and I said it's one of my favourite films of all time. It's one of the best animated films I've seen, and I still stand by that after this rewatch. It's just phenomenal, from the animation to the story to the character development to the pacing to the voice acting. Everything about this film is just perfect. I don't know what else to say. It's a 10 out of 10. And then I watched Across the Spider-Verse. I already did an unscripted movie review on this a few weeks back. I think this is probably going to be my favourite film of the year. I forgot to mention in that review that the score for this film really complements it, and it elevates so many scenes, adds so much tension. Like I said in my review, I think it's on the same level as Spider-Verse as my favourite Spider-Man film, and it's just one of my favourite films of all time, really. It's just phenomenal. I'm so excited to see where they take it for Beyond the Spider-Verse. I'll give this film another 10. And then I watched Renfield. I was interested to check this film out because Nicolas Cage plays a vampire, and it also has that guy who killed himself in the menu. Overall, it was a very fun watch. I like the very stylized gore of this film, and how it kind of feels Fight Club-esque with the voiceover. I think the plot is very predictable and generic, and I don't feel like they use Nick to the film's advantage enough. He's extremely fun in this film, and he seems like he's having a blast playing Dracula. And for the most part, I don't mind seeing Renfield's struggles, and at least some pretty great humour. But I do think the ending was a little bit underwhelming, and I just think there was a bit of missed opportunities, and it just wasn't as good as I expected it to be, in my opinion. I'd give it a 7. And then I watched Raiders of the Lost Ark. I want to see the Indiana Jones films, mainly the original trilogy, because the new film is coming out this year. I'm hearing a lot of mixed reviews from it. I think I might check it out. I might watch Crystal Skull before I watch that as well. I haven't watched Crystal Skull this month, but this film is said to be one of Spielberg's best, but it wasn't as enjoyable as I wanted it to be. Harrison Ford is amazing in his role as Indy, and I love the humour, especially the slapstick nature of it and the fight scenes, but I just wasn't as invested in the story as I wanted to be, with the whole Nazi aspect of the film and everyone racing to get to this supernatural artifact. I like how far they went with the gore in this film, especially considering that it was rated PG in the UK. You got people's faces melting, people getting chopped up in helicopter blades. You've just got a lot of iconic practical effects in this film. It's just really iconic, and it is a really great action adventure from Spielberg. Just not as great as I was expecting it to be. I'm sorry. Again, I'm sorry. I gave it an 8. And then I watched Temple of Doom. I like this much better than the first, and I think it's my favourite in the trilogy. I know there might be some brown face here and there, but the story I found to be way more crazy and fun. Mainly, I think because Spielberg and Lucas were both going through breakups, and a lot of their deepest, darkest feelings were expressed in this film. I also think the humour has improved. Whether it was intentional or unintentional, it just went to next levels of goofiness. I actually like the main trio of characters more than the first as well, especially Kei Kwan, who I obviously recognise from Everything Everywhere All at Once. He's just great in this film, a short round. Just so fun, so cute. I just love how over the top it is. Even if I do feel the pacing was a bit better in the first, I just had a way better time with this. I'd give it a 9. And then I finished the trilogy with The Last Crusade. I think this is a very good conclusion to the trilogy. I think that Sean Connery added a lot to this film, and it's great seeing these two acting legends working together on the big screen. This is probably the film with the most humour as well, and most of it really works. There's a lot of slapstick moments that reminded me of silent films back in the day, like Lauren Hardy. I was really invested in the story as well. I do like Temple of Doom's story a little bit better for how outlandish and wacky it was, but this is a close second. Harrison Ford is great as always, and I like that we get to see a bit more of his backstory in this film. It's just great. Overall, I really enjoyed it. I think I gave it an 8.5. And then I watched John Wick Chapter 4. I was so excited to check out this film because I loved the first 3 films, and this one was an amazing epic 3-hour conclusion that I just absolutely loved. It is much more of a slow burn than the last film, as that one just had like action scene after action scene. This one starts with like a bunch of stuff happening around John Wick, which I found very interesting. I really love Bill Skarsgård's performance in this film as the villain. He just made for a very memorable and interesting villain. I like the people on either side of John Wick as well. You got these two people who join the table for two completely different reasons, and like it all converges at the end so well. Keanu Reeves is obviously great as John Wick again, and the action scenes are some of the most epic and engaging I've seen in the series, with the stair sequence and the top-down action sequence. It's phenomenal. Those 3 hours just absolutely just flew by. The story was just so investing. My biggest regret with this film is that I didn't see it in cinemas, because it just would have looked amazing. I did not expect the ending as well. They had the balls. I'd give it a 10. And then I watched Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves. I really enjoyed this film. It felt very similar to Legend of Vox Machina, which was also based off Dungeons & Dragons. And the character traits and plot points are very similar. I do think Vox Machina did it a bit better. The lore building that show is just better than this film. The fantasy nature is really great, and it just makes for some really unique action scenes, and also leads to some really great humour. The comedy is just really great in this film, and I don't really think it takes away from the main story. The acting is really great as well, especially from Hugh Grant. He plays a very interesting villain. Chris Pine was great as the main character, who brings back this group of misfits to retrieve something he desperately wants. I do think this film takes a while to get into. I found the first 30 minutes to be a bit different than the rest of the film, but apart from that, it's a very fun time. I'd give it an 8.5. Then you've got the Grand Tour Eurocrash. I watched the trailer for this a few weeks back, and it looked really good. I enjoyed a Scandi flick last year, so I wanted to give this a watch, obviously. I just really enjoy the trio of Richard Hammond, James May and Jeremy Clarkson, who just work so well off each other and make for some really great comedic moments. And this was no different. The antics they get into are great, and they kept me entertained for almost 2 hours. I still do have one complaint though, the same that I had on a Scandi flick. The script, I feel, is just being relied on way too much, and I just feel like it lacks that spontaneous charm that Top Gear had. Apart from that, it's a very funny and entertaining watch from the trio. Oh yeah, and it's about cars, isn't it? I'll give it an 8. And then I rewatched Batman. I want to watch this in preparation for The Flash, and it's just as good as I remember. I love Tim Burton's take on Gotham and how unrealistic it feels. It just adds a very comic booky nature that fits with like the weird and wacky nature of the film. Obviously Michael Keaton is great as Batman, second to Christian Bale in my opinion. His Bruce Wayne side just feels so likeable and fun, and his Batman side is pretty threatening at times, as he like actually kills people, which the Nolan Batman doesn't do. Jack Nicholson as the Joker is a really good standout as well. He's also probably my second favourite, but he is very scary and threatening in a very like goofy and funny way, because he is of course the Joker. I do think the pacing might have slowed down a bit during the final act to make way for like the big bell tower scene, but overall it's just one of my favourite Batman films. The Prince soundtrack also complements the film really well. I'd give it a 9. And then I watched Black Mirror Joan is Awful. Obviously the new season of Black Mirror came out. I only really wanted to watch the episodes that people were actually liking, so I only watched 2 from the new season. This was a really good and fresh Black Mirror episode in my opinion. I watched the majority of the Black Mirror episodes last year, and I did really enjoy them for the most part, and I found this episode to be very enjoyable. I get what people are saying about this season and how it feels very different to past seasons, because this episode specifically is very comedic, which I do find to be a very welcome addition to the show. I also find the concept really interesting as well, with your life being played out as a TV show for the whole world to see. Salma Hayek just really hams it up in this episode as well, and it just makes it such a fun watch. The way how they explain how the whole TV show thing works is a bit dodgy, but I do feel they managed to bring it back together for a really great climax, and a twist that I just really didn't see coming. I'd give it a 9. And then I watched Beyond the Sea. I heard a lot of people complaining that this episode became very predictable and just went in the wrong direction, but I did really love this episode. I just think Aaron Paul's acting just makes this episode so good in my opinion, as he manages to play 2 personalities which are very different from each other and just show a wide range of emotions. He's just a great fit for this episode. I did find the concept really interesting as well, and I do actually like where they went with it, even if it was a bit predictable. I do think like the last 5 minutes of the episode did escalate like really quickly, and I do feel like they could have played it out a little bit more, as they were like lingering on a feature length runtime anyway with like 1 hour and 20 minutes, but it is still a really solid Black Mirror episode in my opinion. I'd give it an 8.5. And And then I watched The Flash. I did an unscripted movie review on this a few weeks back. Again, this was a pretty good film. Ezra Miller's controversies aside, I think they did a really great job at playing the two different Barry Allens, and it's nice seeing Barry facing his obnoxious self right in the face. I obviously like the return of Michael Keaton's Batman, as he is one of my favourite Batman, and it's just great seeing him on the big screen again. The story was engaging and fun, with a lot of weight and emotion to it, and I do like where it went with the final act, even if the CGI was abysmal. I give it an 8. And then I finished watching South Park. I can't really rate this since I've watched 19 seasons and I've skipped a few episodes here and there, so it's just very messy. I've really just come to love the show over the past few months, and it's really interesting to see how Matt and Trey spin up things to make each passing season a little bit more unique. I did skip a good majority of the episodes that are rated below 7.5 on IMDb because I just didn't think they were worth watching, apart from the 2-part finale to season 18, which like connects all the storylines from that season. So I kind of had to watch it to find out what happened, and it just wasn't a good 2-part finale. The rest of the episodes that I've watched though, I can't say any of them were bad. I think season 18 was probably my least favourite. The most funniest South Park episode to me has gotta be the Jeffersons, and my favourite episode from the whole show it's a very cliche pick, but it's gotta be Scott Tenorman Must Die. That episode is just so well written, just so perfect, and the way it's executed. And I love how they bring it back in future episodes like 201, which is basically a banned episode by this point, and I did have to search some places, but it is just an iconic show with iconic characters. It's just one of the best animated shows that I've watched. And then I watched Akira. I kind of wanted to watch this after seeing all the memes appear online, and also it's gonna leave Netflix by the end of the month, so this film was just amazing in terms of animation. The story is just really great, and I just love the character of Tetsuro, and I wasn't like sure if he was just going mad with power or if some like higher power was controlling him and like taking him over, and I like how it's not really made clear. The fight scene's just so cool as well, and I really love the future setting. I did find the last 10 minutes of the film to be a little bit confusing. Maybe it's because I have a pea-sized brain, and my pea-sized brain just couldn't take it. Also, I don't know how to feel about the lack of music for this film as well. It does have a soundtrack, and when they use that soundtrack, it sounds really interesting and unique, but there's a lot of moments where it's just completely silent. And sometimes it does build atmosphere and tension, but other times it just feels very empty, and I would like some like score or something just to be there, just to make a scene like more epic or scary. Overall, I give it a 9. And then I watched Jaws. Surprisingly, I have not seen this film before, and I finally got round to watching it, and it was pretty great. Obviously, it's like one of the most iconic films of all time, with so many quotable lines and moments that I already knew before going into this film, but it didn't really tarnish my experience. I just felt like I was watching a really groundbreaking film from the 70s. The practical effects for the shark were just amazing, and I love how the cinematography is used in this film to build tension, and it's one of the most creative uses of cinematography that I've seen from this period. The story was also great as well. I was just really engaged with what these town folk were going to do, and like Brody's actions in like the first half. And then when Brody and the other two guys get on the boat to catch the shark, I did lose some interest. I just feel like they kept going round and round, and I feel like the film just slowed down a bit too much, I'm not gonna lie. But it does really pick up in the last 15 minutes for a finale that just redeemed everything. It's just a classic, and I wouldn't mind giving it a rewatch in the future. I give it a 9. And then I watched Jaws 2. I wanted to give this a watch since I've heard not awful things about it, and it looked interesting to check out the sequel. It was on Prime. I do really like how they tried to develop Brody's character in this film, and I like how a few characters from the last film have returned as well. The shark stuff is great as always, although it does kind of make the shark from the last film just a little bit less interesting now because there's 2 of them. The thing I really don't like about this film is the focus on the teenagers, along with Brody's son. They're just doing the most generic and boring stuff on the beach, and I could not care less about their characters. It's literally like one of the most boring films I've seen when it doesn't focus on the shark or Brody. I just found the third act to be underwhelming as well, and overall it's a big step down from the first, but it does have some redeeming qualities though. I give it a 6. And then I watched Rye Lane. I heard good things about this film, and it was on Disney Plus, so I gave it a watch, and it was really solid. It's like a very simple romance story that is just enhanced so much by the cinematography, sound design, soundtrack, editing and direction to make it an extremely engaging watch. And it can be really funny sometimes as well. You got some really great acting from the 2 leads who just have really great chemistry together, and the whole story around these characters are just great. It's very short short for a feature-length film as well, clocking in at around an hour and 20 minutes. So it moves very quick and comes to a really satisfying conclusion. I do think it maybe feels a little bit too much like a theatre production at times, with how people talk and act. But I don't think this film is supposed to be that realistic, so I can appreciate it still. I'd give it an 8.5. And then I watched Blade. I really wanted to watch this since it was one of the few good Marvel films I actually haven't seen, and it went on Prime a few days ago, so I gave it a watch. And this was probably one of the most fun times I've had watching a movie. This film can just be so unintentionally goofy at points. There's so many unintentionally funny moments that just made this film so entertaining. I really like Blade as a character, and I think he's played really well by Wesley Snipes. The story is really great as well, and I love the vampire lore and how everything works with them. The villain is just so good as well, and I respect how they went all out with the gore, although the visual effects can look a bit dodgy at points. But I kind of think it like adds to the charm of the film. It's just a very solid film in my opinion. I'd give it an 8. It's just a very fun time. So that is all the films and TV shows that I watched in the month of June. I'm currently watching Secret Invasion. There's a lot of mixed reviews about this show so far, but I'm really enjoying it. I just love Samuel L. Jackson's Nick Fury, and his performance is just great in this show. And I really like how they're diving deeper into the school's backstory and all their different motives. I just find it really interesting. And I'm also watching season 1 of Dexter. After watching South Park, I wanted to watch another like big show that was also on Paramount Plus because I was still paying for that. So I watched Dexter, and I'm really loving the show so far. I really like the American Psycho feeling to it all. I think it definitely takes inspiration from American Psycho, and the twists and turns the story takes just makes me really excited to where this season goes. So yeah, if you like this video, please leave a like. If you didn't, please leave a dislike.